We're switching it up today. Of course, if you've tuned into the channel, Amir and I have come in here every single Thursday to give our weekly NFL predictions, of course, for the games for that weekend. But we're going to switch it up a little bit today. We're still going to give our predictions, but we also want to give some midseason awards. And we're a couple weeks late, but I look at it as better late than never. Amir, of course, you're here. How you doing today on this Thursday morning?
I'm doing good, man. The weather's pretty good today. Up here in Adrian, Michigan, man. And I'm excited for this episode because I got some hot takes going, and I'm curious to see how many people are going to agree and disagree with me today.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I'll drop a list in the comments of the video. So if I remember, of course. But without further ado, we're not going to waste any time. I mean, let's get straight into it with the MVP. You see Amir's pick on the screen. His picks will all be on the right. I'll be on the left. And we're just going to flip picks here. So you'll start this one. I'll start the next award. Pretty self-explanatory, but go ahead. Who is your MVP for the 2023 season?
This is the one year where I kind of differed, from the NFL when it comes to the MVP being a QB award, because obviously, the quarterback's the most valuable position in all of sports, arguably. And so, this year, no quarterback has been separating themselves. Obviously Mahomes is still the best in the league, but even he hasn't been playing up to his standard. And so that's why I kind of went against the grain here, and I chose Tyreek Hill as my MVP. I mean, because the dude has been by far the best receiver in the league this year. He's anchoring one of the most explosive offenses we've seen in the past recent years. And I mean, the dude is first in yards and first in TDs while being fourth in receptions. And the dude is completely anchoring that team, pretty much carrying that offense. Jalen Waddle has been having a lackluster season, but Tyreek Hill is taking it to a whole nother level. So he's my MVP.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I just did my awards again based off the midseason awards. So what we've seen from week one until now. And Tyreek Hill, I was going to be honest with you, that was going to be my pick as well. I had the luxury to see your picks ahead of time before this podcast, of course. I had to make the graphics and all that good stuff. But I wanted to go a little bit different than you. So throughout some of these awards, some of them are so obvious that I had to have the same answer. But if there was a chance I could go a different route, I wanted to do that just to show some flowers and to show some love to some other players around the league. And my MVP pick here is going to be a quarterback, a guy that has been chasing the award for his entire career. He's a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame level quarterback. His team has won
Carson
3
Wentz.
straight games. And, I have to sit here and not, I got to talk about a guy that he's found his alter ego, Mr. Unlimited.
That's
Russell Wilson.
crazy.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Russell Wilson, though, I mean, shout out to the Broncos. We'll talk about him later. But I did want to just throw him on here. I thought it was pretty funny. But my actual MVP is AJ Brown. I'm a big
Oh,
AJ Brown fan. If anybody's been following the channel, or especially the fantasy football content on this channel from day one, I've have been expressing all through the history of this podcast. I'm a big AJ Brown fan. And he's honestly maybe my favorite receiver to watch in the league aside from Jamar Chase. Regardless, though, he's another receiver just like Tyreek Hill that's anchoring an offense, whether if he's single covered, good luck. But if he's double covered, triple covered, I mean, if this dude has to do a cartwheel backflip and into the end zone and catch a touchdown pass, he's done that for the Philadelphia offense. And again, Philly is one of the best teams in the league, but they haven't looked their best this season. And a large part of why they've been so successful, not clicking in all cylinders, is because of AJ Brown. So just like you, I picked a receiver that is anchored in offense. My number one pick would be Tyreek, but again, I want to show some love to some other players. Do you have any other honorable mentions here? I know it's a quarterback award, but that's what we're going to do, another award predictions video at the end of the season. So I guess that's when that is for. But any other guys you want to mention here for the MVP?
Christian McCaffrey as well. I'm going to talk about him later on, so I don't want to spoil anything. But Christian McCaffrey as well. You know, honestly, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, as
Yeah, I
crazy as
mean,
that sounds,
it's a
I mean,
quarterback
no other
award.
quarterback
So
has really been, playing on a high level, in my opinion.
yeah, I mean, I
So
was thinking about Jalen Hurts, just because it is a quarterback award and the Eagles are
yeah,
7-2 or 8-1. I mean, but again, that's what the end of the season awards are for. But let's start at the defensive side of the ball. We just talked about a lot of offensive guys. Let's show some love to the defensive side of the ball. And I'm not going to spoil who you have here, but I had to go with Myles Garrett. This could be one of those cases where it's just so obvious, at least in my opinion, because this is a guy that has, again, been one of the best defensive players in the league for the last 5 to 6 years. Consistently year after year, he's one of the most double and triple teamed players, and he's still putting up 15 to 20 plus sacks a season. It's truly, a talent that we don't get to see often. And if he's not the best edge rusher in the game, he's definitely up there in the top 3. This guy, Myles Garrett, again, shout out to Jim Schwartz. He's he's brought a great defensive scheme to the Browns. But this Browns team is not 6-3 without Myles Garrett, and it's not 6-3 without Jim Schwartz. So shout out to Myles Garrett. He's the leader of this dominant defense, the best defense here in the NFL. But who is your defensive player of the year so far?
So for my defensive player of the year, man, I'm gonna go Eli Apple. Come on, I'm just playing, man. Myles
Is he on a
Garrett.
roster?
I think he's on the Dolphins right now, getting cooked. But Myles Garrett for sure. This is kind of self-explanatory. I mean, the dude has been dominant, and I think this year, what's really been helping him, he finally has somebody to kind of relieve the pressure off of him. Zadarius Smith has really helped him out a lot. So Myles Garrett hasn't been getting doubled or tripled as much and kind of focused and game plan against. Because teams have to account for both of them. And that's been the biggest struggle. You look at TJ Watt, for example. TJ Watt has always had a great D-line around him. And so, when he's not dropping the pass coverage, he kind of has people around him to kind of take off that pressure. And that's what's been helping Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
And so, so Myles Garrett's been anchoring the best defense in arguably Browns history. So that's why he's my pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely one of the best defenses we've seen in the last decade. Unfortunately, due to the quarterback situation there in Cleveland, which we'll talk about later. Of course, they are in my top 10, no spoiler there. But we'll talk about it later with the quarterback situation. Unfortunately for Myles Garrett, this is a year that it looks like it would be his award. But given, we don't know how much the Browns are going to win the rest of the way. So if we don't win a lot of games, Myles Garrett might actually not be able to get this award this year, even though everything has lined up perfectly to this point. But again, at least at the midseason mark, we want to show some love to our hometown guy. But then offensive player of the year here. I want to, of course, I'm spoiling it, but you also touched on it earlier. You have Christian McCaffrey for your offensive player of the year. Why did you go with Christian McCaffrey?
So I'm going with Christian McCaffrey instead of a quarterback. I mean, because this dude is the face of the 49ers. Like, when we think of the Niners, when you think about that team, you're thinking about Christian McCaffrey. Without him, that offense is one-dimensional, and they get completely shut down. We even saw that in week 6, versus the Browns in the second half. Once Christian McCaffrey, went out, the offense pretty much fell apart. And, he was banging up the following week. And then, like if teams aren't just fully game planning against him and fully, pretty much neutralizing him, that the offense is completely terrible. And that was the biggest reason why they lost those 3 straight games. Teams were low in the box. Teams are, finding ways to bracket them out the backfield. And I mean, the dude is leading the league in rushing yards, receiving yards, and receiving TDs and total TDs for running back. So, I feel like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, if you leave the Cleveland area or just, I guess, the state of Ohio, pretty much 99% of the time, people are going to say that Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in football. And, I mean, he's just one of those special running backs that he's one of those running backs that you have to pay. And that just shows you how talented he is in an era of football where running backs do not get paid at least more than the league minimum. So Christian McCaffrey, he's that special of a talent, of course, when he's healthy, and he's been this season. And I like that it looks like we're finally going to get a fully healthy season since what feels like his second or third year in the league. But no doubt, he's the heartbeat of this 49ers offense. And again, I would have went with Tyreek Hill here for my award here. I would have went with Christian McCaffrey or even A.J. Brown if I went a different route with the MVP. But I wanted to show love to some guy, or show some love to a guy that doesn't always get the spotlight because he is in a high market team, but he's just not really known to be in the media all the time is a good way to put it. So he doesn't always get the light he deserves. But I'm going to talk about Keenan Allen, and excuse the quality of his image. I could not find a high definition picture of Keenan Allen. Regardless, I wanted to show some love to him here as, again, he's, there's been injuries to guys like Mike Williams in that offense. Josh Palmer is now out for 4 to 6 weeks. Gerald Everett's had his fair share of injuries, as well as Austin Eckler. This offense has not been healthy. And for once, Keenan Allen is the only healthy option in this offense, aside from Quentin Johnston. So again, he is everything for this Los Angeles Charger offense. And again, it's not easy when you're the guy, but let alone when your counterpart, your number 2, is a rookie wide receiver. Quentin Johnston, I'm sure, could be a special talent, but it makes your job a lot harder when the defense is focusing on you all of the time. And this is a guy that's still putting up games with 10, 11, 12 receptions, over 150 yards. I mean, again, Keenan Allen is the reason this team has been competitive, not winning games, but they've been competitive. But what do you think about Keenan Allen here? Do you think that this team has lost too many games for me to put him in this spot?
Honestly, I mean, it's not a bad pick, and people would be more biased towards him if the Chargers were 6-3, 7-2. But in reality, it's like this: the defense is so terrible, and the injuries are kind of hurting this team to the point where it's like it's kind of just being overlooked, which is really unfortunate.
Absolutely. But again, I wanted to just I had the luxury of seeing your answers before, but again, Christian McCaffrey was going to be my pick. So far, we would have agreed on some of the three biggest awards. But let's talk about some rookies. And this one is definitely the most obvious on the year. But CJ Stroud, I mean, this is a guy that I saw for my fantasy lovers tomorrow in the video I talk about it. But this is a guy that I think has 870 plus total yards and like 9 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. This guy's just been on a different stratosphere. And I mean, you're starting to get the noise and people are taking it to the next level saying he's a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I wouldn't go that far, at least in my opinion, but no doubt we haven't seen a rookie quarterback this special from day one, not sitting behind a veteran quarterback, just thrown into the fire and to take over a franchise. We haven't seen a guy this special probably since Andrew Luck. So, but again, I'll let you go in on CJ Stroud here, but it's nice to also break the stigma of Ohio State quarterbacks can be relevant in the NFL.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing you were just about to say about Ohio State quarterbacks. Man, honestly, I thought Stroud was going to be good, but not this good. I'm like really surprised and impressed with him, man. This dude is coming in and he's playing like a top 5 quarterback this year. 10 weeks into the season, and man, especially on this Texas team that nobody expected to even be in the playoff race in the AFC. Exactly, and it's like now it's like, man, they're hot. They're getting the hot hand, and they can honestly finish with a top 6 seed potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I had them as like a 5 to 7 win team. I'd have to go back and check my game by game predictions, but I had them as like a 5 to 7 win team. And I guess right now they have 5 wins. They would definitely have to go on a crazy losing streak to end the year for have my prediction to be 100% correct. But just like you said, I mean, we expected him to be good, just not this good. In all honesty, I thought Bryce Young probably would have been the best rookie quarterback this year, just with how he played at Alabama, getting the ball out quick and not making a lot of mistakes. But it's actually been CJ Stroud who has been just dominant from day one. But any last thoughts here? I mean, I know there's some other rookies around the league that could get some love here. A guy that I'm going to be selfish in saying Jordan Addison should get some love here as he has stepped in for Justin Jefferson, and he has answered the call as he's had a dominant stretch. And again, not to brag, but I also said Jordan Addison was the best wide receiver in the class. But I guess if you want to shed some light on some other guys here like Jordan Addison or another rookie that comes to mind for you.
I mean, honestly, I think this offensive rookie of the year race isn't close. But Addison definitely should be brought up. That dude has handled the adversity well with the team falling apart, all the injuries, the drama, and the collapses. And that man is taking advantage of it. Justin Jefferson being out and him stepping up and not folding under that pressure and balling out is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, as a Browns fan, I hate to break it to CJ Stroud. I know he's from Ohio, or he played his ball at Ohio there in college. But this award's going to be DTRs by the end of the season because, of course, he's taking over for the Browns, and he's not going to mess up the rest of the year. He's going to be the absolute perfect quarterback. But on the defensive side of the ball, it's a corner that I'm not even trying to be funny. Reminds me a lot of when I watch you. Is Deon Witherspoon. To me, coming into the draft, I said he was the best corner in the class, and I said he should have been a top 10 pick. He wasn't. However, Deon Witherspoon, physical, lengthy corner that has just a knack for making the right play all the time, and he's a very difficult cover for these top wide receivers. And, it's not, Tariq Woolen, I guess, would get more so of the credit for being the better corner here in the Seattle secondary. However, if you watch the games, it's not Tariq Woolen's the number one taking all the number one assignments. These are splitting them. So it's like whoever comes to my side of the field, I'm locking them down. But I want your thoughts here on Deon Witherspoon and why you gave him the Defensive Rookie of the Year award over some other talented guys like Jalen Carter and others.
Yeah, I mean, the dude is coming in and outperforming his number one, corner on this team off rip. I mean, the dude coming in is playing like a top 5 corner. I mean, he's out playing dudes like Marshawn Lattimore, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, all those guys as a rookie, which is really tough to do. It's kind of like with Sauce Gardner last year. Sauce came in, adapted quick right away, and solidified himself as a top 5 corner off rip. And Witherspoon is doing the same exact thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very impressive start for Devin Witherspoon, no doubt. But again, like I mentioned, other guys like Jalen Carter, Will Anderson hasn't had the start of the season in his career that I thought he would. But I guess he's had his moments, and there's a lot of other rookies that have had their moments, like Brian Branch. I guess would be a top 3 guy here. But overall, I think it was pretty clear that Devin Witherspoon would take this award. But let me ask you something: if Christian Gonzalez stayed healthy, do you think it would be an argument here, or do you think it still would have been Devin Witherspoon? I know it's all hypothetical, but Christian Gonzalez had a couple good weeks there before he got hurt.
Man, we would definitely be having a serious conversation between those two. I mean, dude, Christian Gonzalez, man, that was my favorite DB coming in. Watching his tape, seeing his physicals and the way he plays, they're both right there together. So man, we'd be having an actual legitimate talk.
Absolutely. But coach of the year, I'm going to start here, and this is going to be a shocker. Again, I had the courtesy to see your answers beforehand, so I want to show some love other places, and I'm going to stay in that same division. I'm going to go with Kevin O'Connell, a guy that has battled with injuries all season, and this team is still 6-4, 5-4, regardless. This is a team that came into the year after a 13-3 year, whatever they had last year. Amazing year for the Vikings last year. They come into this season trying to replicate that success. Through the first month of the season, first 5 weeks, this team is 1-4. They're struggling, and on top of that, they lose Justin Jefferson for potentially what would have been the season. But of course, Jefferson might come back now. And then Kevin O'Connell has put on a masterclass of a coaching and over the last couple of weeks, and they managed win after win after win. And after winning 3 straight games, not only did Justin Jefferson go down, but then their second best offensive player, Kirk Cousins, goes down to an injury. So he lost his franchise quarterback and maybe the best receiver in football in his offense. But then they still kept winning with, Jordan Addison stepped up, TJ Hawkinson stepped up, and then they traded for a rocket scientist in Josh Dobbs. And he's came in and quickly has made a difference. Again, you want to show Josh Dobbs some love, but it is all the offensive brilliance and the offensive schemes of Kevin O'Connell. So I just want to show some love to him with all the battle and the injuries he's had to deal with all season.
I really went really vanilla here on my pick. I chose Dan Campbell, which he'll probably get it because Detroit is getting a lot of publicity and a lot of favor.
Fan favorite team this year.
Yeah, and I was picking between Dan Campbell or DeMeco Ryans. Dan Campbell. What was kind of holding me back at first was the fact that Detroit hasn't really played anybody really, and those big games that they played, they struggled offensively and defensively at times. But I mean, this team, the most dangerous team to play against is a team that's motivated by their coach. We see this every single year. You got a great players coach. The team can really achieve anything that's at hand, and that's why I chose Dan Campbell. It's bigger than the numbers, bigger than statistics. That man is motivating that team to play hard for him week in and week out, and it's going to eventually lead them to being true contenders in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the NFC has 2 top dogs, no doubt. But I think if there's anybody to compete with those 2 top dogs, it would be the Dan Campbell-led Lions team.
Yeah.
So I mean, sometimes vanilla is the right pick, just like Myles Garrett. Sometimes vanilla is just the right pick. But again, I had the luxury to see your answers beforehand, so showing some love in some other places. But Super Bowl matchup here, and we both had the same NFC team, so I wasn't going to beat around the bush. Let's just throw it up there. We both have the Philadelphia Eagles, and this was my preseason pick for the NFC. And again, that's not a hot take. That's not, a crazy take. They were expected to be back here to this point, and they've done just that. I kind of mentioned it, and me and you always mention it every time we bring them up. But this team is still not playing, I think, at their fullest potential. Maybe you changed your mind on that, but I don't think that they're playing as good as they were last year, and they're still 8-1. So to me, no, my opinion hasn't changed all season, even when the Niners were 5-0. Me and you would come on this podcast, and I would say the Eagles were going to the Super Bowl. So to me, they're still my NFC favorite, but anything you want to add to the fact that you have Philly over teams like Dallas, like you said, earlier in the year, and then, of course, the Niners, who have gotten better.
Yes, I mean, right now I have Philly because, just like you just said, man, it's scary the fact that they're not playing their best football. And they're still just running through teams with ease. Hurts hasn't been playing up to his standard, like what we expected. But this team is still just dismantling teams on both sides of the ball up front. And the Niners, like we've seen their best football, but we've also seen, their worst football. And so that's why, this Philly team has just shown, a steady pace and it's only up from here. So I'm choosing Philly.
Yeah, I mean, even if San Fran wins out, it's just when it comes to a playoff matchup, I'm gonna take the team and the team that has the better quarterback and the team that just to me, well, I don't know, it's definitely up in the air now between who has the better roster with that Chase Young addition. But I think Philly just to me, I'm gonna trust the better quarterback, the way better quarterback in Jalen Hurts over Brock Purdy because the rosters, I mean, you could pretty much say they're even. But
Yeah.
for me, on the AFC side of things, I wanted to I'm gonna die on this hill. I'm gonna die on this hill,
You
and
better not pick my thing. Oh my
I'm gonna
God.
go with the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, to me, look, I know they don't look good right now. They just lost to CJ Stroud, and that wasn't pretty at all. But to me, it was my preseason prediction. I'm gonna ride with them because aside from that Texans loss, they had a stretch where they beat the Seahawks, the Niners, and the Bills in 3 straight weeks in dominant fashion. This is still a team that we know at full strength can be dominant. Last week, let's not forget they did not have T. Higgins, one of their most dynamic offensive weapons. They still have beat that young Texans team? Yes, they should have still beat them, but they weren't at full strength. When this team is at full strength, they should look even better than they have. And at this point last season, this team was 5-4, and they still almost made the Super Bowl. This is a team that just history tells us they start slow and then they get hot. I think this Bengals team, to me, with the AFC being so wide open, I'm going to roll with my preseason prediction, even though it's probably not pretty. But again, like aside from the Chiefs, the Ravens, they struggle in big games at times. You have teams like the Browns who just lost to Deshaun Watson, the Jaguars who shrink in big games as well. The AFC is so wide open aside from the Chiefs. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs' biggest rival. But who is your AFC prediction at this point in the season?
So I got a rematch of the last Super Bowl. I got Chiefs versus the Eagles here. I've been saying this for the past few weeks. This is the best defense Mahomes and the Chiefs have had since he's been a starter, and that's what separated for me. This Chiefs team, usually their defense steps up in big games, but now it's like all games they're stepping up. I mean, they're forcing turnovers, making it easier on him, even when he's turning the ball over at a high rate. And this team has a top 10 offense and a top 5 defense, surprisingly, despite the receiving core being weak. And I was looking at Cincy and thinking about it, but it's like, I'm going based off of what I'm seeing now, and Kansas City is telling me that they're the favorites.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they're another team just like the Eagles where we know they have that different gear and maybe even 2 gears. And right now they're still winning games at a high rate, even though they're not playing their best football. But you see the little Super Bowl logos, of course, it is that this is our Super Bowl matchups, hypothetically. To me, I would have the Bengals riding this hot wave and beating the Eagles in the Super Bowl, having the Eagles lose 2 straight years. But then the Bengals would also get their first franchise Super Bowl. Of course, not their first appearance, but third time's a charm, I guess is a good way to put it. And then for you, it looks like you have the Eagles beating the Chiefs. I guess if you want to dive into that matchup really quick.
Yeah, I got the Eagles beating the Chiefs. You know, we've seen more out of the Eagles, up until this point. But you never know; it might change the second half of the season. For them, I mean, just for the simple fact, I mean, like we talked about last week, they got a difficult stretch coming up, and so it'll kind of expose their weaknesses and their flaws, and we'll kind of see from there.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. That's the thing that the NFL season, though. We might get to a month and a half from now. We might be talking about how the Jags are front runners in the Super Bowl picture.
Right.
So a lot can change. But on the screen now, you see our top 10 from last week, or I guess I should preface by saying my top 10. I don't know if you always agree with what I have on the screen, but this is my
No.
top 10 from last Thursday. Of course, we ran through it. And in all honesty, for the first time ever, no one has fallen out of my top 10. It's controversial, and then I'll touch on it here in a second for my number 10 team. But right outside, you have the Red Hot Texans. Even though they're only 5-4, they've won 2 straight games, and again, CJ Stroud has been on a different level. He's playing like a veteran and not a rookie. But then Mr. Unlimited, we talked about him earlier in the Broncos. They've won 3 straight games against 3 competent opponents. So both teams here, if you want to have them at the number 10 spot, I don't have any worries about it. I'm not going to fight you because number 10 has not been very impressive, at least in big time games. And that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, they lost last week by like 31 points to the Niners. Again, we know it's the Niners and they're one of the best teams in the league. However, if you're a team that you're trying to sell the fact that you are a contender, you didn't play like it, and you haven't really played like it. The only big time win they've had this year has been against the Bills, and the Bills are a mediocre team as we see at this point. They're not as good as they've been in the past. So the Jaguars, they're at number 10 for now. But again, if you want to have the Texans here, if you want to have the Broncos here, I'm not going to fight you on that fact. But at number 9, this might be the last time they're in the top 10. But the Cleveland Browns, they rise a spot because, I mean, they had an amazing win last week against the Baltimore Ravens. Come from behind. Deshaun Watson's 14-14 in the second half. And technically, I mean, that was his best game he played as a Brown. But to me, you know, just given the fact that Dorian Thompson-Robinson's going to be the starting quarterback the rest of the way, I'm just not sold on the fact that we're going to be able to, you know, continue at this rate. But again, we'll talk about it here in a second. At number 8, we have the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys dismantled the Giants, and you can argue they're number 7, and I wouldn't hate that fact. But to me, I just think in a one-game scenario, I think Team 7 would beat Team 8, and that's really all it comes down to. Both track records are relatively the same, but the Cowboys are going to be fed a lifeless Panthers team this weekend, so they should have another dominant win. At number 7, we do have the Miami Dolphins. They were off a bye week. They just move up because the Jags fell so many spots. And at number 6, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. They lost a tough game to the Houston Texans, but they only dropped 2 spots because, again, they weren't fully healthy, and I know what this team can do at full health. And also, I mean, you can argue the Texans are a top 10 team in football, but for me, they dropped to number 6. Your thoughts on 6 through 10? Anything you would change?
Honestly, I kind of like this list so far. I think the Texans are on fringe top 10, so I'm not mad at the Jags being at number 10 there. I think the Browns are still at 9 because in my opinion, I think their defense could still, kind of solidify them a spot, in the top 10 or on the fringe of top 10. And the Dolphins, especially fresh after a bye, I still think they watch the Cowboys. The Cowboys shrink in big games as well. And it is honestly pretty accurate so far.
Yeah, accurate so far, and I didn't really want to have the Bengals any lower than this. At number 5, we do have the Baltimore Ravens, a team that the Browns beat last week. The reason I kept the Ravens in the top 5 was because if they can just figure out their second half woes, this is a team that might be unbeaten at this point in the season. Their big loss to Pittsburgh and their big loss to the Browns have just been second half meltdowns and really fourth quarter meltdowns. So if they can just finish games, this is a team that we're talking about still in the top 3 conversations. But the Ravens, again, they fumbled big time last week late. They just need to figure out their late game, play. At number 4, though, we have the Lions, who move up 1 spot again. They beat the Chargers last week pretty handily. I mean, the Chargers don't have a defense. They just play offense only, kind of like Madden. But the Lions, they still handle their business. And sure, you can argue the Ravens are still better than the Lions. Just the fact that the Ravens, I don't know if we can trust them come second half. But again, you could say the same for the Lions, as in big games. I mean, they got blown out by like the Seahawks and then the Ravens. I'm not going to fight you too hard on 4 and 5. At number 3, though, with the addition of Chase Young and coming off of a bye week, a much needed bye week, this team looked back to what they were. The San Francisco 49ers, when you start 5-0 and you have the track record they did before that 3-game losing streak, all you need is one dominant win. And in my opinion, that brings you back up to this top 3 level. I wouldn't say they're top 2 yet, but they definitely have a top 2 roster in the NFL. They are at number 3. My number 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs, and my number 1 is the Philadelphia Eagles. I ran through those quickly because these are 2 teams coming off of a bye, and nothing has changed for me as far as the landscape of the top 2 dogs. But again, rightfully so, those are my top 5 teams. Do you have any thoughts, anything you would change as far as my top 5?
Now, this is probably the most I've agreed with you so far. But I would put Baltimore over Detroit. I mean, because they absolutely dismantled them, when they played. And, like I said before, Detroit hasn't really played anybody, really, or won any big-time primetime games. And so I'm taking Baltimore over Detroit.
I mean, absolutely. Again, I'm not going to, it's 1 spot difference, especially between like 7 and 8. You can argue that's different. Or even if you want to put a team in at 10 over the Jaguars, again, I'm not going to fight you too hard. But moving over to our actual predictions, of course, last week, I'll get your record here in a moment, but I was 9-5. There's a couple games there that were upsets, and they kind of screwed my week. But 9-5 overall is an okay record. On the season, though, I finally cracked that 100-win mark as I'm 104-46, just about 70% correct rate. We've been hovering around that number for about 4 or 5 weeks now. I'm trying to get over that hump. It just seemingly I can't. But what was your record last week? And if you have it on hand, what is your record on the season?
Man, I went 8-6 last week. It was unfortunate. Man, it was some games that really was kind of like a 50-50 game. The most disappointing game was that Texans and Bengals game, and then that Broncos Bills game. But I did get my upset pick right. But my total record for the season is 101-49.
Okay. I mean, we've been hovering around the same record for a couple weeks now. And again, it's literally a couple game difference. And that could all change this week. But let's talk about the teams that are on bye. As again, there's a team here that we had a question over on Instagram, and I want to bring it to your attention. But for the Colts, the Saints, two teams that are just kind of, skating by this season. They're just mediocre and they're winning games, though it's not always pretty. The Saints, of course, had some injuries there to Derek Carr, and Jameis Winston actually looked like a good quarterback. Of course, he's a gunslinger. He should have had probably 3 or 4 interceptions last week, but he didn't, and he ended up, saving Chris Olave's fantasy production. But they head into a bye here. And then for the Colts, again, like I mentioned, Gardner Minshew, not much to talk about, but I guess right now they're 5-5, and shout out to Shane Steichen for getting them to this point without their star quarterback. But then for the Falcons, they're 4-6. They've lost 3 straight, and not a lot has gone their way. But I guess on the positive side, Bijan Robinson had his best game last week, I guess aside from his week 1 performance. But the team I want to talk about here the most is the New England Patriots. And shout out to Mason. He dropped a comment, but he asked, should the Patriots fire Bill Belichick? And in your opinion, what is your answer to that? I guess before we reset the Zoom.
Not at all. I mean, shoot. I mean, they're in a spot now where it's like, you got a generational quarterback that could potentially get drafted to Bill Belichick this year, and the last thing you want to do is to have a chance at picking him up. You go ahead, you draft him, and you bring him into a new coach, new system, and everything. You rather just keep Bill Belichick, keep the Patriot way, and bring him in the right way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. To me, when you're going through a rebuild, the one thing you need is stability, because if you just clear house, roster wise, and there's just not going to be a lot of confidence there, and there's not going to be a lot of good morale there. So I think Bill Belichick, if anything, he brings stability. So to me, it's not a matter of, should you fire him? You can't fire him for what he means to the city, to the organization, for what he's done for the organization. You kind of just have to ride it out. If it's pretty or not, if you always agree with what he's doing or not. At the end of the day, this is like a 5 or 6 time Super Bowl champion. And, as great as Tom Brady is, Bill Belichick was the backbone of this franchise for the last 25 years. So to me, you can't fire Bill Belichick, even if it's not always pretty and the roster is not always great. This is Bill Belichick. We're talking about maybe the greatest coach that's ever done it. But again, I want to ask you here, who needs this bye week the most? As the Patriots, of course, in the running for Caleb Williams, but who needs this bye week the most out of these 4 teams?
These 4 teams, I'd argue the Saints. The Saints have some problems they got to figure out offensively. Some injuries, with their quarterback. And, they're in a spot right now where it's like, they honestly should win the NFC South. You got the Buccaneers, but, the Buccaneers defense is absolutely horrible, and that's not really going to get better throughout the year. And so the Saints are kind of in a spot where it's like, they can't tank. They just traded for a guy that, they wanted to somewhat kind of, save their franchise just a little bit. And so, they need this bye the most to regroup and figure some stuff out.
All right, we're back. And, of course, I'm too cheap to buy Zoom Plus. I'm going to say that every single Thursday because the reality is never going to change. But, Amir, you said that the Saints but they need the bye week the most because they've underperformed in all of our standards. As, again, they made a big trade in the offseason and they made a big signing for Derek Carr. And they're mediocre, and that whole division is. But I guess it's been that way ever since Drew Brees stepped down. But shout out to my GOAT. Of course, Drew Brees is always on top.
No.
But let's move over. Something new that we added to the show last week. The race for Caleb. Well, if you think he's going first or not, I'm telling you, he's going first overall in this upcoming draft. Whether if that's by trade or whatever the case may be, Caleb Williams is going to be the first overall pick. But at number 1 here, the Bears moved up. And let me explain this really quick, actually. If you see the green arrows, on an actual NFL franchise basis, you don't want to have a green arrow on the screen because that means you're getting worse. You're moving towards the number 1 pick in the draft. But I guess for these select teams, you're moving up. You're getting closer to that next franchise-changing player, maybe. But the Panthers lost last week to the Bears, and they have the number 1 pick now. Of course, the Panthers traded that pick for Bryce Young. The Bears, virtue of that trade, have the number 1 pick now. So if the Panthers continue to be bad, the Bears, they might now have a decision to make between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams. The Giants at number 2. And I actually think the Giants at the end of the day will finish with the number 1 pick in the draft. But then the Patriots, they're a team that I think will finish with number 2 in the draft, as crazy as that sounds. But that's your top 3. At 4, Kyler came back. And like we talked about last week, we both kind of hinted at it that Kyler Murray's going to screw this team's chances of getting Caleb Williams. So now they're in a position where they need to position themselves where they can get Marvin Harrison or a Keon Coleman to pair with Kyler Murray. Because if they fall too far, this team's going to be in a bad position again next year. And then for the Bears, the actual Bears pick, they won last week. They moved down the rankings here, but they still have a top 5 pick. I want to ask you again one thing. Who do you think will end up with the first pick at this point? And then I guess your overall thoughts on the list here.
I think it's going to be the Bears. The Bears honestly just suck on both sides of the ball, and I don't see them really, winning any more games. To be honest, the Patriots still got some stuff to work with. So the Patriots probably still get a few more wins, end up with that 3rd or 4th spot, and I just don't see the Cardinals or the Giants, just finishing with the worse record than the Bears.
Now let me ask you: do you think that because this first pick here is for the Panthers? Do you think the Bears as the 3 and 7, like their actual pick, or do you think it's the Panthers pick that will get the Bears the first pick?
I think it'll be the actual Bears.
The actual Bears. Okay. That's interesting. Now, to me, the only reason I'm thinking the Giants is because they have Tommy DeVito. I'm going to trust Justin Fields to win more games for the Bears and Bryce Young to win more games for the Panthers than Tommy DeVito for the New York Giants. Of course, Brian Daboll hasn't done a great job this year given what he's had. And then the Patriots, to me, I'm saying that they would have the number 2 pick if they bench Mac Jones. So if Bailey Zapp is the quarterback the rest of the way, of course, Gronk, Patriot legends coming out like Julian Edelman and Gronkowski saying that nobody believes in Mac Jones there in New England. So if there's no confidence, whether if they start him or not, I think the Patriots might finish with a top 2, top 3 pick. Of course, we talked about how Arizona is probably not going to be in this picture at the end of the day. But I think I trust Bryce Young for that number 1 pick and Justin Fields for the Bears to win more games than Tommy DeVito. And that's really all it comes down to. But that is the race for Caleb. Let's get into our week 11 predictions. And this one's pretty boring. As you see on your screen, you see a lot of the same answers. So on the left side of your screen, you see the slate of games, of course, color-coded per time slot this weekend. But we have the same exact answers for each and every one of these games on the left side of your screen. So, Amir, I want to ask you this. Again, is there any game in particular that you want to dive into or any team in particular that you want to dive into on this screen?
On this screen specifically.
Of course, we could dive into the Browns if you'd like.
We really need to dive into the Browns and figure out, who they're going to pick up.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I had this conversation with, my dad, and I just now figured out that, Carson Wentz technically isn't on the 53-man roster of the Rams. And to me, I know a lot of people don't like him, but I am a Carson Wentz guy. I do believe he's better than any other option we have at this point. Okay. I mean, our Joe Flacco, is he going to come out with his walker on the field and play football? I mean, because we know Matt Ryan's not coming back this year. Do you think, I guess I'll ask you this, out of PJ Walker, DTR, or any free agent quarterback, who do you think is the best option at quarterback for the Browns the remainder of the way?
Man, I'd rather go ahead and get Peyton Manning with his broken neck to play for us.
Okay. The disrespect.
At this point, I'm sorry. Our best pick would have to be to go out and grab, I'm thinking between Matt Ryan or Wentz. You know, PJ Walker has shown no improvement. And it's his chances of playing. I mean, the dude struggles under pressure. He completely folds whenever teams are sending heat at him. Getting in the storm windows. I'm not gonna jump the gun and lose hope in DTR yet. I mean, because we've only seen one game against a top three defense. So
He was thrown
um,
into the fire. He had no prep. He had no knowledge
yeah,
he was going to be the starter beforehand.
yeah. So this week at least he can kind of get his feet on him, kind of adapt, get mentally prepared to start this week. So we'll kind of see this week.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I'll say this. I'm going to throw this crazy theory out at you. And I saw this surfacing on the internet, but I want to get your opinion on it. So, with the recent reports of Gronkowski and Julian Edelman and other just New England reporters saying that nobody has confidence in Mac Jones to be the guy anymore. Now, we also talked about it earlier with the future of Bill Belichick. We both believe he's there to stay until he hangs it up. So, given the fact that, let's say, Bill Belichick has no confidence in Mac Jones the rest of the way, let me throw this crazy theory out to you. Do you think there's a chance that, Mac Jones is released, saying that nobody believes in him and Bill Belichick's going to be the coach? And if Bill Belichick's the coach, he doesn't believe in Mac Jones. So, why keep him on the roster? So, if Mac Jones asks for his release, this is the theory. He asks for his release and he signs with the Cleveland Browns. Let's say that were to come true. Do you like that for the Browns? Or I guess I just want your overall thoughts on that theory that Mac Jones could be on the way to Cleveland.
Man, that would actually be crazy. And it's one of those hypotheticals. And obviously, I would enjoy it. I wouldn't mind it. But it's kind of tough to really kind of be excited about it because in reality, it's like you can't win anything unless you have an elite quarterback.
Right.
The fact that Deshaun's out and there's no great quarterbacks left. Our chances at a Super Bowl, which is the end goal, is pretty much done.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a crazy theory, and you need like six things to happen for
Yeah.
that to become a reality. But in all honesty, just for the confidence of our young quarterback, let's say Watson comes back next year and it looks worse than he has in a Browns uniform. Maybe DTR is the guy for us going forward. Again, very small chance, but maybe he is the guy. So I guess if he can come out in the second half, gain some confidence, get his feet wet, like you mentioned, and I guess be the guy going forward. Maybe we'll have a quarterback conversation this time next year. But the other games here, just to run through it, if you're an audio listener, we have the Bengals winning tonight. We have the Browns beating Pittsburgh in that tough divisional matchup. I guess I'll ask you this because we made these predictions before the Watson news. I would assume that we're both changing our answer to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I mean, honestly, I'm still keeping the Browns here.
Okay. I mean, all honesty, nobody believes in the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. I think the Steelers will probably win this Sunday, despite DTR being the quarterback. But then we have the Dolphins beating the Antonio Pierce-led Raiders team that has been hot the last couple of weeks. We have the Lions taking on the Bears, the Jags in their divisional matchup against the Titans, shutting down Will Levis. We have the Chargers in a game that is going to be very weird. I wanted to go with the Green Bay. They have the home field, and of course, the Chargers don't have a defense. But I think whoever loses this game loses playoff chances for this season. So I'm going to go with the team that needs it more, at least at this timeline. Give me the Chargers. And, of course, Arizona and Houston, I think should be a shootout. But we're both going to go with the hot Texans team. The other 1 o'clock games, we have the Dallas Cowboys going to Carolina. We're both taking Dallas, of course, there. Shout out to Rico Dowdle. He's making the most of his situation there in Dallas. He is the true number 2 and not Deuce Vaughn. But then the Giants and the Commanders, one team's trying to win, one team's trying to get Caleb Williams. So give me the Commanders here. We both took them, of course. But then the 4 o'clock games, these games, I guess you can make an argument either way. We have Tampa Bay at San Fran. We're both taking the San Fran. The Jets at the Bills. I've seen this be a very popular upset pick of the week, but we both went with the Bills despite the new offensive coordinator. And then we both have the Rams in an upset at home, taking down the Seattle Seahawks. I was surprised that you were agreeing with me there. But again, that was going to be my pick coming into the week. But any thoughts so far before we get into Sunday night, Monday night? Because I want to dive into those games.
No, honestly, we're pretty much on the same page. I'm actually surprised to see you pick the Rams too.
Yeah,
You know,
I penciled that in before, last week. I was like, week 11, I think, with how the Rams dominated the Seahawks in week 1, I was like, there's no way that, I really don't believe in the Seahawks as a team anyway. So I
Yeah.
thought the Rams are going to handle business yet again if Matthew Stafford is out there playing football. But then Sunday night, I think, a very underrated, very interesting matchup. And to be honest, a lot of these Sunday night games, if they're one-sided, I kind of just watch the first quarter, the first half, and then I go to bed. Because Monday, of course, is the start
Right.
of the new week. But this week, we might actually have to watch this game. We have the red hot 4-win straight Minnesota Vikings. They are playing the Denver Broncos with Mr. Unlimited. Of course, he has an alter ego.
Unlimited.
Uh, but we of course both have the Broncos here at home. But I guess I just want your thoughts on that Sunday night matchup between two interesting teams.
Yeah, it's honestly a game that's kind of like underrated, I would say. It's no, outstanding or amazingly flashy players is going to be playing, but if you love football, if you're a true football fan, this game's going to be entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, and then of course, let's not beat around the bush. The Sunday night game or the Monday night game, excuse me, it is the only game this week that we differ on. So our records are going to be one different this week, of course, mathematically. But I have the Eagles on the road here, going to Arrowhead in the Super Bowl matchup, a team that just, I think, has more to prove in this game. If there is anything to prove, they're both dominant teams. But then you also have Kansas City here at home. Give me your basic argument on why you have the reigning Super Bowl champions taking down the Eagles yet again.
So so for me, this is a tough pick, and I spend days kind of thinking, you know, um, who will come out in this game. And, I start thinking back to the Super Bowl, for example. It came down to one possession. The Chiefs somehow found a stretch a way out and win this game. And what kind of led me to picking Kansas City was the fact that Hurts and the Eagles offense has struggled against great defenses this year, big time. Despite them winning games, I mean, shoot, they struggled against Dallas offensively. I mean, they struggled against the Jets, huge time. We saw that loss right there. They even struggled against New England earlier this year. Against some physical
Yeah.
defenses Kansas City possesses. And so I'm picking the better quarterback here, and I'm picking the home team. So I'm picking the Chiefs.
Hard to go against that argument because, again, like you've mentioned a lot, this is the best defense in the Mahomes era. At least that's what it seems like on a weekly basis. But then for the Eagles, maybe the most complete team in football. Of course, are NFC favorites as of right now. But to me, I think in your scenario that you're saying it would be a Super Bowl rematch this year, I think that would be awesome for the Eagles to win this game because then it would set up I guess a rubber match. But I have the Eagles here because I think they're coming into this game with more to prove. Chiefs have been there, they've done that, they've already handled the Eagles. But the Eagles are coming into this game, I think, just with more to prove. And of course, Taylor Swift is going to be in attendance. Maybe Travis Kelce's not focused on the game as much.
Let's go.
Of course, that's not my big argument for why the Eagles are going to win.
That's why I'm watching to see some T Swift.
Okay. If the reason, well, I guess, probably a good percentage of viewers are going to be watching strictly for Taylor Swift. But the Eagles, I think they just have more to prove. And that's really my argument here. Two teams that are on the same level. But
Yeah,
overall,
man. People don't understand, man. This is the battle of the light-skinned quarterbacks, man. This is a generational matchup, man. You got two of the most handsome quarterbacks in the past decade, and this is going to be exciting.
I don't know what that has to do. We're just going to go past that fact to the simple fact that that is going to do it for today's podcast. Amir, again, thanks for joining. Today, we switched it up a little bit with some midseason awards. We still ran through our top 10. And of course, we did our week 11 predictions rather quickly this time. But let us know down in the comments if you're listening at this point. Do you prefer this style where we just run through the predictions and have something else on the show? I guess I'll get your opinion on that off camera. But then in the comments, just let us know if you prefer this style or if we go back to the old style where we break down each and every game and give our predictions that way. But ultimately, that's going to do it. Amir, thanks for coming out. Any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Yes, sir. I'm excited to see these games this week. Got some great matchups. And I'll be back next week, ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, again, your season's over, to my understanding. So maybe you'll see Amir a lot more on this podcast if you like it or not. But without further ado, on the road to 4K. Hopefully, we can hit it by Sunday. We've been doing that rather quickly. But then Tuesday, we'll be back with our 1 month in all-star ballot for the NBA. That should be tons of fun. But until then, get out of here.